Welcome to another spot interview of NeverEndingPanel.com. I'm here with author and illustrator Joseph Corsentino and model Elizabeth Maxwell, who is one of the models and the fairies in The Time of the Fairies, which is the name of the book. I have to tell you, this book, I have seen it, is stunning. It's a mixture, and Joseph will, I guess, go into how he created it and why he created it, of photographic elements and I guess artistic elements. I don't know if it's anything painterly, but I kind of wanted to get into, why don't you tell us the story of how this came about, how you and your wife Donnie created this, and give us the Time of the Fairies story.
Basically, it started that Time of the Fairies was created as a result of me being a science fiction fan more than anything else. I'm also a fan of fantasy, but really had a sci-fi edge to it. I was a photographer, and it's all photography based, and I really wanted to bring the idea of these classical fairies and angels and vampires and bring them into a real, a more modern place, more 21st century, more something accessible and understandable by someone who lives in a city, not someone who lives in some German old town,
Right.
or, still kind of goes into the forest and collects their
Right.
little mushrooms and goes
Right.
and cooks them, and that's their life, and that's it. No, we live in the cities, we have alleyways, we have garbage, and we have corrupt politicians, we have crazy problems on our own right now. And if I took these kind of characters and I redesigned their origins and basically erased all the mythologies, but took into account what people do preconceive in their own psychologies, know about them, and kind of make it turn on its head. And so it changes the way people look at these kind of creatures.
So is that, does that fall under like urban fantasy?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely an urban fantasy in the sense that, we are talking about angels and vampires and fairies, but they are in the cities. They're
Right.
back. And it's not like they've been here the whole time. The whole point of it is they're suddenly back. The fairies are suddenly back. Now what happens to the world and what happens to us as a result?
Right, I remember being struck by one of the images I saw of a fairy just sitting there with an open guitar case, I think with a guitar, and the notion of a fairy kind of in grunge gear peddling for money on a grungy street was such a stunning visual. You always imagine, fairies flying around and being all Disney-like somehow, and even within the context of urban fantasy, I guess, and I haven't read a lot of it, but that vision, was striking, and that theme sort of falls across a lot of your visuals, right?
Yeah, I wanted these characters to be real. I wanted when someone looked at some of these pictures of the fairies, be like, I know someone like this. I know someone who's that unique and that beautiful, but is kept so down by the world or society or choices, and the fact that there is such a beauty and a youth factor to these fairies that I think when you take them and you show them how our youth and our world and how beauty and possibility is treated in this world, I think a fairy with an open guitar taste trying to be an artist and begging for money from passerbys is an appropriate visual.
Yeah, I think that's what I was struck by, that you had such incredible beauty in sort of a dark environment. So I'm going to ask you, Elizabeth, what is it like to sort of model for these, and how are you asked? Because, normally a fairy looks pretty, so now you're sort of in a different kind of position, right?
It's a very different experience from doing, glamour fashion photography. Right. A big thing that I've noticed with Joseph and how he works with his models and how he worked with me was that understanding the psychology and the environment of the character that you're playing is key. Because it's not just about sitting there and looking pretty, it's about conveying an emotion or a story or a sense of something.
Right.
And so there's a lot of conversation
right.
That goes on before the shoot even takes place. And then after that, Joseph just kind of trusts that the model knows where they're going and lets you run free and wild and take it where you take it.
Right, and again, I'll just add to that, these aren't pretty models in ugly settings. They look like they are. She looks like she's desperate to have someone throw a quarter in. In every situation, there really is sort of an acting going on.
Oh, there is. When I scan for my models, I would have a model come in at least a few times before I'm like, that's it. I'm going to trust her with a character that I love and that I know, and that I really want to tell this story, because some models don't get it. They don't understand it. They come from a glamour perspective, or they're too uncomfortable kind of exposing those emotions. I need actors who understand characters, who understand there is degree of pretend, and let it out. We're able to, I want you down, depressed, gritty, and you're lost, you're homeless, something horrible.
There's a real interview process.
And then boom, a model does it.
Got it.
And you kind of let the performance then tell itself, and it really just is. If you're there at a photo shoot, you really get there to experience a model really performing. And I'm giving some direction here or there, guiding here or there, but mostly I trust in the performance of the model. Because at that point, she should know the character, she should know the world, and she should know the emotions, and everything else just comes natural to them.
Got it. And I understand you're working on a continuation of this process?
It's kind of a continuation. It's taking it to, it's another book. The first book was very much a kind of a brief history of Time of the Fairies, if you will. It was, if you want to understand the pictures and understand what makes our fairies and angels different, read this book and you'll get a basic understanding. And it followed the character of Emily, played by Elizabeth Maxwell. And this story basically tells the whole story, the whole character-driven. There's like 12 ensemble characters that really we follow through this series. And it's called The Afterlight. And we're working on book 1 right now, which is actually a post-apocalyptic story. So we start in the year 2078. So this is still like a fantasy. This is still fairies. This is still angels. This is still all these things. But it's a very more science fiction driven. It's more political. It's more, we're really making a character story here. And we're going to follow the character of Hallian, which falls and becomes Emily and continues into actually the events in the book, the first book, will be covered in this graphic novel series. So
Wow.
it'll be a mixture of photography, illustration, graphic art, and novella story.
Wow, it's quite a lot to bite
Yeah.
off there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
What made you decide to sort of push off into such complexity from, because Time of the Fairies is simple beauty. There's not a lot, I notice, in terms of writing and what goes on. You really you're moved and thrown into the scene, but now it sounds to me like you're definitely adding more content and adding more stuff behind it. What was the inspiration?
Well, the content almost was always there. In fact, from the first day the Time of the Fairies existed, there was a story and a few variations of that story in my head. It just took a while to really develop it into where I thought the story should go. For a little while I was like, maybe I should go there, it's this, and this is really a fairy-centric story, and it really is about, the rebellion against the man to a certain extent, and it's about, following your dreams or taking whatever you can and building something strong out of it. There's a lot of themes and a lot of politics because of the backstory of a lot of these characters and a lot of these species. So in order to take all that and optimize it, I think the graphic novel series was the best way to go about it. I could tell a simple story with it, but I really wanted to do something that had an arc to it, and you could follow these characters the way life is, complex, dramatic, sometimes uneventful, but still some things a lot out of your control.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for being with us on NeverEndingPanel.com.
Right,
Elizabeth, thank you for being with us. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much.